What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 47. I am Jennie O'Connor, and I help multi-passionate creatives slay imposter syndrome so they can grow their influence and self-promote with grace. Let me ask you a question. Are you working a job that brings you no satisfaction while you look over your shoulder at all of the things you wish you could be doing that truly light you up? Do you dream of somehow combining all of your loves into a venture that makes you money? I've created the Multi-Passionate Master Plan that will help you do just that. So if you are committed to making 2022 the year you stop working at a job you hate and finally find the career love of your life, head on over to jennyo'connor.com/masterplan to jump on the waitlist. This step is important, you guys, because folks on the waitlist will get exclusive access to the course and 6 weeks of live coaching for more than 40% off. So if you miss out on being notified when I open the doors, you will miss out on getting all of the value that I so lovingly packed into the Multi-Passionate Master Plan for a literal steal. So go jump on the waitlist today. You know how sometimes you meet someone and immediately feel safe and at ease in their presence? That is exactly how I feel about today's guest. And I suspect that's part of what makes her so damn good at her job. Today, you're going to hear from the lovely Angela Marie, who is a certified holistic health coach, trauma-informed mentor, intuitive healer and meditation guide, and an event and retreat facilitator. She also hosts the Focus Within podcast to empower women who feel stuck to find the areas where they are living out of alignment so they can reconnect to themselves and begin their healing journeys. I know this conversation is going to put you guys in a delicious headspace, so let's get to it. Hey, Angela, how are you doing today?
I am good. How are you, Jennie?
I am great. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm so excited to have you on. We talked a while ago, and I've just been so looking forward to this because we have so much in common. And I just think that there's a lot of really cool stuff that we can dig into here. So you are really interesting to me because all of your passions kind of fall under an umbrella of like holistic wellness, but you're still somewhat of an octopus. Like you've got arms in all these different branches of the thing. So would you say that you've always identified as an everything enthusiast, or are you only kind of just coming to this realization now?
I feel like I've probably always been this way, but so much of like my life and the path that I've walked, I might not have necessarily known it because I just never knew how to like trust myself or feel confident enough to be involved in all of the things that I love doing. So I would say definitely I've been probably my entire life, but this is the first time that I'm actually like, oh, okay, like I actually am super passionate about all of these different things and kind of discovering that as I go.
Yeah, interesting. So you don't really have memories as a child of like having shiny object syndrome, or do you?
No, I really don't. I feel like in the conversation that we'll probably go to, I feel like that's my own trauma response of like trying to like block out things of my past or childhood and things. So maybe I just am not aware of it. I don't know that that's something though that you could be like, I have it now, but I never had it. So I'm confident that I probably always have, but yeah, I'm just kind of like figuring this out as I go through my own like healing journey of things to be like, wow, I never really knew that to be true about myself, but I kind of like it.
Yeah, it's contrary to conventional wisdom about how to be successful in life. So I think that there are quite a few of us probably who sort of stuff that tendency down or try to deny that it's there. As children, we're allowed to sort of play in whatever realm we want to, but obviously, we get to high school and we start to get directed towards we have to pick a thing, and certainly in college, like pick your major. I mean, they say that at the age of 17, we haven't even formed the part of our brain that makes decisions yet. So we have to make like the most important life decision we're going to make for the next several years right at that moment. Yeah. So it totally makes sense that you would like that some people do figure it out later in life. So you haven't always been in the wellness space. What did you do before?
So I don't know how far you want me to go back with this, but I would say I grew up in Ohio. I've lived in Ohio my whole life. So like a typical Midwest blue collar type of family, right? Like you go to school, you get a job, you have a family. So that was kind of like the path that was laid before me, or what was, I guess, expected of me, just with what my family has always done. And there wasn't a lot of focus on health or wellness really, like, at all, right? So it really wasn't until back when I was 27. So I was already at that point in time a mom of two daughters, and had recently gotten married. And I had some like crazy rash on my skin that what didn't really like make a lot of sense. But because I was getting married and I was being really particular about like how I was going to look and my dress and all of that kind of stuff, went to a doctor, ended up getting this diagnosis 2 days after the wedding that I had this aggressive form of lymphoma cancer. And so even thinking back, I know,
Wait,
right?
you got the diagnosis after the wedding?
Yeah. So I had
Okay.
testing done prior, and then the results came back
Oh
two
my
days.
God.
Yeah. Yeah. So even just to answer that question, like how much into wellness, I didn't even know what lymphoma was. Like I think the nurse on the phone was like kind of perplexed that I didn't respond in a way that maybe most people would have. But to me, I thought it was a fancy term for the rash that I had. No.
Mm.
And that kind of set the path from that point forward to where I am today. Obviously, at a young age, newly married, a mom of two, saying that you have cancer, knowing that you have cancer, I freaked out, right? And so at that time, thankfully, I had a person that was very well connected to somebody that knew the head nurse of the oncologist here at the Cleveland Clinic, which is like, if anybody is listening, knows that the Cleveland Clinic is like one of the top rated hospitals in the country, if not the world. So I felt very blessed in that moment that I was going to be seen by somebody that knew what was going to be happening, and I could be a part of this process, because the thought of treatments and all of it, I was like, what is going to, like, what is happening?
Oh
And
my God. 2 days after you get married, like,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. So that was about a 3-year process of going back and forth between an oncologist. The rash part of it was, I was working with a dermatologist that specialized in this type of lymphoma. And at the end of that 3-year period, nobody really knew what was going on. Like they kind of just said, I never did treatment. I was an advocate for not wanting to do that because there were a lot of unknown questions that never really had answers. And the doctor at the time had said, I think at this point, like all of these tests and things, CAT scans and things that were going on to check my body, he felt that it was doing more harm to my body than whatever this rash that showed itself as lymphoma could have been doing to my body. And so I kind of walked away. And still to this day, I never really had a clear answer as to what that was. They gave me some type of like diagnosis that it's never gotten worse. It's never, I mean, it's not fully resolved. I will say that it has gotten progressively better over the past 14 years or whatever it's been from that point. But
But it's
yeah,
not gone.
I still do kind of get some of these bumps, if you will, like this rash, but it's never to the level that it was prior to me getting married. So it was very much like very noticeable. I might see a spot here or there every now and then, but it was significantly worse back then. But really, I guess to answer your question, sorry, I just like to give that preface because
No, that's such an important piece of your story, but
yeah,
how crazy. My gosh.
yeah,
Wow.
it was really crazy. And so I guess at that point in time, and what my thought process was like, I had not really known anything about how to take care of myself in a quote unquote healthy way, other than like you go to the doctor and you get your checkups and things like that. So I really took to heart the fact that I was going to be responsible for my health, my well-being, and I discovered a really big passion in health and wellness and all of that holistic type of living. So I would say that was when that first happened, was probably 17. I'm like, I can't do math this quickly in my head, but
Me neither. It's
2009,
fine.
Yeah. So it's been 15 years, but it's been an ongoing process of different types of modalities and things that I've learned, because I feel like for anybody that is into health and wellness or has maybe something similar that's happened to them, we're always learning and growing when it
Mm.
comes to like ourselves and our bodies. So, what started out as being really invested in my nutrition and exercise has kind of evolved more into looking at trauma and like understanding how these pieces of our body all work together that we're not necessarily taught when we're growing up, right? Like we just have traditional medicine and things like that. We go to the doctor when we are hurt and they'll give us a pill. And I never really understood that there was like this whole world out there of things that we could be learning about. And that's where I find myself now is like, I've walked this path of going from a cancer diagnosis to then discovering that maybe some of this stuff, maybe even my own cancer diagnosis, could have been the result of some underlying things that I needed to learn how to process and work through. And that's what I'm passionate about as far as like helping people at this point in my life and what I find myself doing the most.
Interesting. So prior to that diagnosis, you were just working a job. You weren't like passionate about a
No.
thing. Interesting. I find so many of us, what we become passionate about is helping other people go through some sort of trial that we've had to go through ourselves. So it totally makes sense to me. Can you explain for my listeners who may not know, like when you say holistic, what exactly does that entail?
Yeah. So to me, holistic is truly like learning how to find a balance between nourishing our minds, nourishing our bodies, and then nourishing our soul. So, I think a lot of people get really wrapped up in the physical aspect of what health or wellness looks like, because that's the thing that we see the most, but we're not necessarily looking at our mental health. We're not looking at our spiritual health. And for anybody listening that maybe doesn't identify with their spiritual side of themselves, in my heart and what I believe as a woman of faith is that we are these souls that are having this human experience. And so it would be almost ignorant for us, at least for me, to kind of ignore that piece. And so when we're able to learn how to balance those three pieces together, I think that that allows us to be living like a truly healthy, holistic lifestyle.
Yeah. And that's something I'm not to knock Western medicine. It has its place completely. It has its place, but that's something that I feel like with a lot of Western medical practitioners often gets overlooked. Like I still marvel at the fact that a lot of Western medical doctors don't understand that what we eat directly
Mhm.
affects like
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
health. Like it's been a very long road for me as someone with celiac to like constantly be like, no, I think that maybe the food is causing the problem. And they're like, no, food has nothing to do with how well you sleep. And I'm like, yeah, no, if my body is struggling to digest my food, then I'm not going to sleep well. It's weird where that disconnect is there. So what you're saying is all of these pieces contribute to your overall health, right?
1,000,000%. And I'll be honest, like it was hard for a while. Like even and again, going back to dealing with oncologists and oncologists that are part of one of the top hospitals in the world, right? And thankfully I had a doctor that was listening to me, and I almost felt like I was being guided through those conversations without really knowing anything at that point. Like I intuitively knew that I didn't want to be taking chemo or doing radiation for things that weren't making sense, right? So yeah, it's not to say that there aren't practice, and there's plenty of practitioners out there now, but at that point in time, I had no real way of knowing that there was maybe some of the things that maybe more people are familiar with, like functional medicine doctors or naturopaths, and all of these things that I feel like are really becoming more popular, which I'm so thankful that they are, because
Mm.
it's a very important part of, to me, being able to help heal people in this way. And truly it always comes down to me is like holistic also means like we're able to do things in a more natural way as opposed to relying on certain medicines and things like that that we traditionally use. Like there is such healing power in things such as meditation and various different modalities of healing that I'm excited to see the growth that's happened truly since this first happened in my own life. And I'm sure there's other people that are just now maybe even realizing that there is this other opportunity to heal in a way that doesn't feel so unnatural.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this notion of a pill with several side effects that require other pills to counter those side effects. And then it's just this slippery slope of,
Yeah.
expensive, fake, poisonous thing. I mean, I know they're not poison, but you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
versus there, you could just change the way you eat and you can do, all of the things that you, I think, teach to your own clients. So you talk a little bit about how trauma can play a role in disease. You are a trauma informed mentor. What does that mean?
Yeah. So kind of going back to like my own, understanding of myself and what I walked through. And when I truly began to understand and implement some of these very things of healing, such as, nutrition, exercise, working with certain types of practitioners that did lean more towards the natural way, I discovered and met a really amazing woman who became a friend, but she was a mentor who was really passionate, is really passionate about trauma healing. And I guess, looking back to my childhood, my life, I grew up in a lot of trauma. And I hate to say, like, a lot of people associate the word trauma with like awful, awful, awful things. And obviously there are awful, awful things that are traumatic, but sometimes we don't even recognize that certain things could be traumatic to us when we can trace back the steps and path of our life. And for me, there was just a lot of things that happened in my childhood that I know for a fact now affected me, right? Like my parents were divorced, just different things that happen. Some simple things, even just being a woman, right? And like growing up and your fights with your friends and name calling and all of the things that we just take as like, well, that's normal. Like,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, but all of these types of things, as I learned, were having like actual effects within my nervous system and the energies that we carry within our bodies. And so when we have some of these experiences and we don't necessarily understand that they're happening, we don't know that they're happening, we're not conditioned to look at these kind of things, right? Growing up, we're not taught these things by our parents or educators or whoever, right? And so when you really start to look at some of these things that have happened and understand that maybe your body has always been in this kind of flight or fight response your entire life because of one thing, or maybe a series of things that have happened. We don't necessarily know how that is truly affecting our body. And when our body is like not in balance and fighting itself because of these different things that trigger us when we have these stored memories, stored energy that live within inside of us, it's making our body react in the same way as if it did maybe 25 years ago.
Mm.
And so, yeah, for me, I would say that that was like a huge learning point for me because I thought when I was going through this process and understanding what trauma was and understanding how it had been a huge part of my entire life. And then through that marriage, even I don't have any, I don't have any proof to any of this, but I can almost guarantee without a doubt that my body was reacting the way that it was with that rash because of my body trying to send something to me, like an alarm to me, to try to warn me about walking into that marriage. I've since left that marriage, and a huge part of my transformation and in learning how to heal through this cancer even allowed me to start learning things where like all of a sudden the blinders were off on everything. And I was like, I'm in an abusive relationship. And I was in this
Mm.
relationship because it was mirroring back to me that comfortability that I had experienced as a child. And it kind of all of these things started clicking to me. And I was like, wow, like if this is what happened to me, and if I feel like I've been able to heal myself, and by heal myself, I told you already, right? Like I still might get some of these bumps, and I don't know, and maybe I never will know, but I just felt God telling me in those moments, and as I was walking this path, that I was like, if this is happening to me, how many other people are out here that might be having maybe not a cancer diagnosis, but other physiological symptoms of
Yeah.
things that could be directly related to this unhealed and unresolved trauma that lives within our bodies. And I was like, I need to do something about this. I want to do something about this. And here we are.
Yeah, I can so relate to that. I was in a bad relationship and my hair started to fall out. And it was like literally my body being like, all right, you haven't listened to anything else. So we're
Yeah.
going to make you bald. And then I listened, but I mean, sometimes it takes something like that. Another thing that came up while you were talking was, and maybe you experienced this with your own clients, I feel like there has become almost like a competition. Like my trauma isn't as bad as other
Mm.
trauma. Like I'm not going through that because like my parents were just divorced, which is not nearly the same as being like molested as a child or whatever. But like trauma is trauma. Like if it is still having an adverse manifestation later in your life, it's something that needs to be it's not a scale of like yours only
No.
counts if it's this large,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter. That's one of the favorite things that I can relate that to is like it doesn't matter if your trauma starts with a big T or a little t. Trauma is trauma no matter what it is, right?
Yeah. I think that that's so important because I mean, and that applies to a lot of different like aspects of my own journey is, like not feeling like I deserve to have wealth because I hadn't struggled enough compared to
Mhm.
somebody else. So I think that that's an important thing for my listeners to hear is that, if there's like something that keeps coming up for you or something like, especially if it's starting to manifest physiologically, that
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it was just like, you were bullied as a kid, that's it. That's an important piece that needs to get resolved for your
Yes.
overall well-being.
I'm
Yeah,
a- Mhm.
100%. So you work with a lot of people who struggle with feelings of imperfection. What
Yeah.
what kind of work do you do with people around that? Like what tips do you have for my audience members who might want to try healing themselves in this area? Because I think for multi-passionate people, this is a big sticking point for us.
Yeah. So again, like I feel like most times these feelings, these thoughts, these beliefs that we have are or could be a result of like a trauma response that we have. So if you think of somebody that's multi-passionate, right? Where you know that you love doing something. For instance, like you have a podcast. I have a podcast too, right? I've had thoughts of feeling like, oh my gosh, like I would never be good at doing something like this because of fill in the blank. But really, maybe it's because you're telling her, well, you're not good enough. You're not this. Well, where does that thought come from? Like, where does that truly come from? And maybe it doesn't necessarily have to do anything related to trauma, but somewhere in our course of life, somebody has fed us that belief that we have played over and over and over in our head. So when we can get to recognize it, I think that's also like a huge thing to point out too, is that I think we live in a culture with so many people being coaches or different jobs and things like that we have that somebody might be allowing people to kind of like dismiss that part of their life. Like, well, you can just say an affirmation 500 times and you'll stop believing that. But like, no, what I find to be the most helpful in the women that I get to work with is like, we're not dismissing the fact that you feel this way. Like, you need to actually like look at that and like see that and like affirm that that's how you're feeling and let yourself sit with that feeling before trying to push it away. Like, it's in that moment of learning how to just be with something instead of trying to do something to let go
Mm.
of that feeling. And so that can be a million different things for a million different people, but that feeling of being imperfect is us trying to put ourselves into this position of like, we're not good enough, we'll never be good enough to do these things, and understanding that we're actually perfect just the way that we are. Maybe we're not supposed to be doing certain things, right? But how would you ever know if you never allowed yourself to like sit with that feeling and understand, go a little bit deeper and try to figure out where that feeling might be coming from? If you can put it back to like, I remember somebody, an old best friend, a parent, whoever it was, and like remembering that instance of something, or maybe you don't remember it and that's okay too. But like, if you can just acknowledge yourself, and I'm sure you've talked about this maybe in your podcast before, but like that inner child work, that inner child healing is how
Mm.
I always try to relate how this might look in real life. Is like, imagine yourself being a mom to your younger self. And like, as a mom, right, you would never go to your child and say, oh, you're okay. Like, you want to validate that experience for somebody. And then you're going to like
Yeah.
literally like wrap yourself around your child and let them know like, it's okay. You are loved. And so in doing some of those they seem very simple, but it can be challenging to do because again, we're not taught to do these types of things. And that's why I love working with the women that I get to work with, is because I get to be that person that helps guide them through that process of learning how to connect to themselves and learn how to sit with themselves in this way, and then also empower them to show themselves the love and validation that may have triggered this exact feeling of them feeling imperfect.
Yeah, that's such a big thing because when you are a jack of all trades, you are a master of none.
Yeah.
So you can go through your entire life feeling like you're not an expert. So you're imperfect at everything that you do. And I just
Mhm.
think that that is such an important thing to like not deny, but it does like for me it was an entirely like a mental switch that there's something really special about being able to do a lot of things well and being how interesting are multi-passionate people who can speak a little bit to a lot of different subjects. And I always joke that like multi-passionate people are useful as fuck in a zombie apocalypse. Because if we had to rebuild society from the ground up, like we would be uniquely qualified to do that. Whereas like we need a doctor, sure we do, but like the doctor is good at doctoring, like that's it, you
Yep.
know?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that that part of what you do is just such an important piece. And yeah, I absolutely love that. You and I talked before about not loving the title of coach. I
Yeah.
don't like using that when I'm like I call myself a facilitator of greatness, but you also don't really identify with it. Why is that?
I wish I had like a definitive answer for that, but honestly, I think it's just because of, again, like living in this time and having experienced so much growth and the beauty of what is happening in the online space. I feel like there's a lot of people that call themselves coaches, and so I think that triggers me, and not because I don't think that they are or aren't good at something. I just don't like the term because I feel like a lot of people use it, and I
Mhm.
also think that it also doesn't really represent the kind of work that I feel like I'm doing to people. I don't want to be a coach. I feel like a coach is like, I think of, playing softball as a kid, and I'm like, my dad was my coach. So no,
Right.
like, yeah, I love facilitator. I do women's events and retreats. That's what I am in those moments, is I'm a facilitator, right? And so when I'm working one-on-one with people, I'm more like a mentor. It's like almost like I'm like your best friend, but I'm not, like a different level of that. So I'm more of like a big sister mentor. But again, you could not put a title on it. All that I know is that I want to facilitate greatness and show women that they're safe first and foremost when we're in this walk of life and we have all of these different things happening. It's sometimes really important for us to remind ourselves that like we're good right where we are. Like we can be safe right here, right in this moment. And so if I can bring that safety into that and then help guide them through whatever steps that they feel called to walk through as they move through our time together, working together, or just through life in general. I don't know that there's a word for that, but I feel like it's more mentorship, is really how it feels.
Yeah, there is something a little bit like drill sergeant sounding about coach. Like I hear what you're saying. Like yours is a gentle approach to this process as opposed to do more reps, or something like that. And like for me, I've always felt like, and this not a knock to coaches out there, like keep doing your good work, but to me, it feels like it implies that I have everything figured out and you don't. And I'm not by any stretch of the imagination trying to come from that perspective. Like I've had to figure it out as I go. I'm still in the process of figuring it out, and you have all the answers inside of you. Let me facilitate pulling them out. So it sounds like we're very aligned in how we approach.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the entire premise and how I will say I didn't even name my business because I just feel like God put that in my heart was, my business is called the Focus Within. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you.
Yeah.
Learning how to find those answers within yourself.
Yeah, I love that. So tell me about these retreats that you facilitate because they sound amazing. Like what sorts of things happen at these retreats? What kind of activities and stuff?
Oh, they're so lovely.
They sound
Honestly,
amazing.
they are. And being a multi-passionate person, this was not something that I ever saw on the radar, but it was like one of those things. I went to one immediately when I was in that environment. I was like, oh my, this feels good. And then things just kind of happened to where now I have women that are literally like, when is your next retreat? And so, yeah, it goes back to just wanting to create that safe space for women to come into where they have an opportunity to leave their everyday life, right? You leave your husband, leave your kids, whoever, maybe you leave nobody but your cat or nobody at all. But it's just that stepping out of your comfort zone to step into a space where you know that you are going to be completely taken care of for the entire weekend with nourishing meals, with different types of healing modalities. We've done yoga, sound bath journeys, different types of workshops geared from anything from self-love to maybe even some talks about trauma. And that can be kind of hard to do in that setting just because it takes a lot to go through a process like that. But just even informing people on what some of those inner thoughts that maybe they have that they've never felt comfortable in sharing with anybody else, they're in a safe space with other women that have a shared desire to really, again, step out of their comfort zone and want to explore what this healing journey can look like outside of maybe some of the other things that they've done before. And it's just a really beautiful experience for women to come together. I think after COVID and with everything that's happened, that's kind of separated so many people, it's been a beautiful way for people to again feel connected and to know that we're never alone in this journey of life. And so when you can connect people, when I have the honor of bringing these women together to do so in this container and in this space, it's really beautiful to see the transformations that can happen in this time together.
Oh, it just sounds so amazing. So have you always done them in the same location?
No. So I have
You
one
have one
coming.
coming up, right?
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
one coming up in April. The first two that I did, and I will say the first one was not really like my own. I've just kind of like dipped my toes and I've just kind of been like a leader. I've led workshops and things. So this will be my second that I've kind of like done research, done some things and been the brains behind it. This one is completely different. It's at a location in New York. Both of the other ones were both in Ohio. New York is close to Ohio. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what the future holds, but I just trust that as I continue growing in my own journey, that opportunities and people I'm connecting with so many people that I'm open to obviously going anywhere, but just right now it feels really good to have these kind of like close to home because I am from the Midwest and I feel like a lot of this type of healing and terminology and things that we're talking about in this podcast aren't really well known in this area as opposed to say like a California or other places that might be more alternative. So it feels really good to be doing it so close to home because I know what that feels like being from this place and to be able to offer this to women that I know are on similar, you know, territory, if you will. Like we have similar lifestyles and things. It feels really good to be doing it here.
Yeah, to be bringing awareness where it's not as prevalent as it
Right.
is here. Yeah. Yeah. It's so wonderful. I'm going to have to come to one someday.
I know we talked about this.
I know. I mean, if I could just travel around and go to retreats for the rest of my life,
Same.
right? That's the
Same.
dream. That's the dream. Definitely. Well, I do have a question that might put you on the spot a little bit, but I think that it's so, so relevant to your entire life's journey. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what do you think that would be?
What I have said to myself is that I think we are just again so conditioned to to always be looking outside of ourselves. It starts at such a very young age as we're developing and starting to, form friendships and as you go through school and just the entire like growing up process. I think there's a lot of focus on the things of the world that don't necessarily teach us how to connect back to ourselves. So my advice would be to really learn what that looks like to look within ourselves and that might look different for everybody, but I think we all have this kind of internal intuitive knowing and gift that gets really drowned out by the rest of the world. But if we really take time to focus on that part of ourselves, that we might be able to not allow so many things to affect the trajectory of our life when we can learn to trust ourselves in that way.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think so many of us have turned that voice down on our intuition, and that's
Yeah.
kind of what you're speaking to is that like inside of you are the answers. And yeah, that's beautiful. I absolutely love it. What is one life-changing book that you have read that you would recommend?
You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was like one of the first books that one of the first mentors that I worked with shared with me. And it just speaks so much into, again, going back to something like a cancer diagnosis or a celiac disease or anything, anything in between. I think that there is a real opportunity for us to understand the way that our mind, again, our mind, our body and souls are all working together, and how some of these different types of illnesses and ailments that we have might be a way for our body to be trying to connect with us and let us look at different parts of us that we might be completely missing. And so that was a book for me when I started reading that. I was like, okay, again, like I kind of felt like I intuitively knew this all those years ago. And then this was just more of like a validation to be like, I wasn't crazy for trusting that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. I'm not familiar with that one, but of course I am familiar with Hay House. So I will certainly look into that, and I will drop that link in the show notes. And tell my audience where they can find out more about you and listen to your amazing podcast
Oh,
that I love. I just love listening to you because you have such a soothing, genuine presence. And so like you're so suited for the work that you do. But anyway, how can we find you?
thank you so much. Okay, so yeah,
Welcome.
I have podcast is called The Focus Within with Angela Marie. You can find that on Apple, Spotify, wherever you guys listen to your podcast. My Instagram, Facebook, all of that is all at The Focus Within. And then what else? My website, thefocuswithin.com. That's where you can find information about my retreat, my upcoming retreat, any future retreats that are coming. So yeah, everything is basically The Focus Within.
Fabulous. Do you still have some room in this upcoming retreat?
I do. I do. I do. Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. So, and I wanted to say for anybody that listens to your podcast, if they're interested in wanting to come, I would love to offer a discount for anybody that finds
Oh,
out about the retreat through your podcast. So feel free to reach out to me. I have a special coupon code that I can share with anybody, or if you prefer me to share it with you, that's fine. But yeah, I do have a special.
yeah. Can I include that in the show notes? Is that
Yeah, yeah,
okay? Perfect.
yeah.
Perfect. I'll put them there. Wow. That's amazing and so generous of you. I absolutely love it. Thank you. This has been such a joyful conversation. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to be here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I, from the first time that we met, truly, like, I was like, oh my gosh, this girl is like kick ass. We're totally like on so many like similarities and things. So yeah, it's been fun to reconnect and have this time together for sure. Thank you for having me.
You are so very welcome. And I look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Yep.
Take care.
You too.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. If you found this content valuable enough to warrant a tip, you can show your appreciation by visiting buymeacoffee.com/Jennie O'Connor. Or you can support the show by rating and reviewing, which would make my entire life. And I would love it so very much if you would come and hang out with me over on the socials at Your Creative Fairy Godmother. My goal is to help creative people like you step into the spotlight and make real money from their art. I've created a ton of free resources to help you out with this. One of those is my Focus Toolbox, which includes the top apps and practices I implement to prevent distraction and get more done. You can find that at jennyeoconnor.com/Focus Toolbox. And while you're there, go sign up to be notified the next time the Multi-Passionate Master Plan goes live. Until next time, I love you guys so much. And I want to remind you to be your amazing unicorn self because everybody else is already taken. Now get on out there and do the thing.